turn our attention to some baseball. Steve Gardner does a great job covering baseball for USA Today. Joins us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on a Thursday on 97.3. What's going on, pal?
I'm not as revved up as you are today.
I don't know what it is. You know, you got to bring the passion in the airways, right? People don't like opinions. That's just the bottom line. They don't. If it doesn't jive with my thought process, then all of a sudden the guy saying it has to be a jackass. That's how they feel. So we have an opinion on something. You and I, we go back and forth. We might not always agree, but it doesn't mean you're right. It doesn't mean I'm wrong, and it doesn't mean that anyone's hating. You know, people don't like opinions, Steve. I don't know what to tell you. It's like we had one of the callers just call up and ask me what I thought of Gabe Kapler after 30 games. And I said, well, what do you think? And he stinks. He wants to get him out of here. Now, I appreciate the opinion, but it's still only 30 games, is it not? Right? I mean, has he kind of turned the tide around?
Better, I think much better than anybody thought they would be at this point.
And that was one of my points. Listen, I agree with what the caller said regarding some of the lineups. I'm not the biggest proponent of some of these lineups. I'm really not. I'm not the biggest proponent of some of his lineups, but I understand when you want to protect Santana a little more because he's struggling. I understand Kingery struggling a little bit. I think you have to give Herrera more at-bats and a little more playing time. But the bottom line, this is a team that's 17-13. They've struggled. They salvaged that game last night against Miami because it would have been horrible to get swept. And then they turn around. They get a good performance from Nola. They're kind of where I thought they would be after 30 games.
Yeah, you had them over 500 and challenging for a possible playoff spot.
I had them. I thought they would compete this year, and I said when we did the predictions, I thought at the end of the day, Atlanta was going to be better, but I thought if everything fell into form and they got solid pitching with the move of Arrieta and Santana showed you who Santana is, I thought they can be a 500 team and maybe contend for that second wild card.
Yep, and that was when we did our staff predictions, our bold prediction for 2018 at USA Today. That was my bold prediction, that the Phillies would finish above 500 and would challenge for a playoff spot. So, yeah, it's one thing from theoretically possibly being able to do it, but to go ahead and do it on the field, they're off to a good start to be able to. So kudos to them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Mets, listen, they're such an enigma right now. They're back and forth. They're back and forth. They're up and down. And then you get the news with Jacob deGrom and his issue there as well. And now Callaway comes out and says that he might miss his next 4 starts, but apparently he's going to pitch next time around. Listen, I don't know. I look at this situation right now. This is where Callaway makes his money because he's got to figure out a way to deal with that starting rotation. And if deGrom's going to be off injured or potentially go on the shelf, I think they have to treat him with kid gloves. But the other thing I'm thinking is, okay, well, you still have a guy in Matt Harvey. So, I mean, the timing and the irony for this is really amazing if they have to go to Harvey.
Yes, indeed. And it sounds to me like, we talked about how, the change with the Mets and Mickey Callaway coming in, and they did a whole bunch of things in the offseason with their medical staff. Doesn't it just sound like the same old Mets again? I mean, we're concerned about a guy that's going to miss 4 starts. No, wait a minute. No, he's going to pitch. This sounds an awful lot like last year with Cespedes, or any number of other guys that were injured. I don't know. To me, this is one of those where it sounds like the ownership is trying to overrule things and against the better judgment of everybody else that says, hey, wait a minute, this is our best pitcher. We need to take care of him and at least give him some time off because this could be a serious injury. And again, to think that deGrom is going to go out there and make his next start or that's even a possibility, to me, just screams somebody doesn't know what they're doing.
No, I agree. And you look at their lineup. Reyes actually is going to lead off Bruce, Cespedes, Cabrera, Conforto, Gonzalez, Rosario, Nito, and Vargas as well. So the Mets got their own issues. The Phillies get a night off before they start a 3-game set against the Nats. How about the Atlanta Braves? I mean, when you looked at this team going into the season, did you think they would be as competitive? That's the first question. And if you really think about it, they have 2 or 3 really dazzling young players, whether it's Soraka, they've got the second baseman, Albies, I believe, Acuna Jr. I mean, these guys are dazzling all over the place, and I think they're kind of ahead of schedule here.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was one of the things we looked at. I felt like, the Phillies, with some of the veterans that they got in the offseason, were a little bit ahead of the Braves in their rebuilding process. But I think one thing we couldn't anticipate is that Ozzie Albies would take such a leap from last year to be as good as he is right now, that Acuna would be, it's possible. There was a lot of hype for him over the offseason and in the spring, but to jump right in there and be as good as he's been, and to get all those pitchers. Soroka is not the only pitcher that they have coming up through the minor leagues either. There's a ton of talent in that pitching staff in the Atlanta farm system. Yeah, they're probably coming together a year ahead of schedule, but this is definitely a talented team. And if they get guys, like Sean Newcomb, who hasn't really seemed to put things all together in his major league career, now starting to pitch as well as he did last night, that's going to be pretty amazing once if they get all these guys performing and at the age that they are. This could be a really interesting team going forward.
Yeah, he pitched well last night. Braves beat up on the Mets 7-0. How about the Dodgers, right? I mean, this is a worst-case scenario. You lose Seager, and that's a devastating loss for the Dodgers, which right away I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, who's out there? Manny Machado, forget about the Yankees, forget about the Phillies. I mean, now do you think this is a situation because it's such a devastating blow to the Dodgers where they figure out a way to try to work out a trade here, at least a rental for half a season with the Baltimore O's and Machado?
I think they need to consider it. What we'll see, though, is the Dodgers will look to fill things in-house. They can move Chris Taylor to shortstop, which they've done. They've got some outfielders. They've got some depth in their system that they can fill in those spots. I think what we'll need to see, though, is can they win? Can they make up some ground on the Diamondbacks, who are so far ahead of everybody in the West right now? It's pretty scary. But over the next month or two, can the Dodgers get back over 500, get Rich Hill back, get Justin Turner back, and some of those other guys that actually are coming back this season, and then they can see what they have and reevaluate. I think it's probably going to be they're not going to be able to catch the Diamondbacks with the team that they have. And that Machado trade that I think everybody feels like they need to consider is going to be a serious consideration for them and something that they will need to think about long and hard because, that's a huge void. Corey Seager was their best player all around, and to lose that guy for the rest of the season, you need to make up a lot of his value somewhere. And Manny Machado is one of those guys that could be, and the Dodgers had interest in him, in the off season. So, and possibly, going into next year.
Yeah, Taylor and Hernandez, they can play shortstop, as we were talking about. But Taylor, he really hasn't shown that 2017 form. And I don't know. I mean, Hernandez, I've watched him a little bit. He doesn't really fare pretty well against righties. And I think it would be interesting, too, because you look at Baltimore, and how bad and poorly they played. Are they going to sell at the deadline? Does it make sense to maybe ship them off to the highest bidder, which I don't think is any surprise because if you look at the Dodgers, they also down the road, they've got the money to spend, right? Because now they've been linked to all three of these huge names when they hit the market after 2018, Machado, Harper, and of course Kershaw, who's currently on their starting staff. So the Dodgers do have money. If we were to have this discussion, if it rears itself out with Machado, I just think, I don't know how do you overcome that type of loss. And you mentioned Arizona, and you're right. It seems like they're not going to sit on their laurels. They're not going to feel bad for the Dodgers, and they're poised to maybe make a run and just try to bury them right now in May. Yeah,
they had some success with them, and certainly head-to-head, except for the playoffs last year. But during the regular season, the Diamondbacks have really had the Dodgers number in terms of those regular season matchups. So, yeah, at this point, Arizona looks like the best team in the National League for sure.
Before I let you get out of here, what are your thoughts on the tweets by Bauer, maybe insinuating, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, that the ball's being doctored there in Houston?
Yeah, I think he said later that he wasn't aiming specifically at Houston, but just the fact that you could get, if you have some sort of substance, and pitchers, everywhere try and do what they can within the rules, maybe a little bit beyond the rules, to get a little bit of extra grip on the ball to be able to spin it, because it's been shown that the higher the spin rate, the more effective the pitches are. And I think one of the things which was pretty interesting that was uncovered is that Bauer, in his last start, I believe, in the first inning only, had some stuff on his fingers, and his spin rate was like 200 or 300 revolutions per minute higher than it normally would be. And then in the second inning and throughout the rest of the game, it was back to his normal level. So it seemed like he might have done something to doctor the ball just to prove a point. And I think what he was saying yesterday when he met the media is that people do it. We need to have some sort of a standard to where it's legal to have some of that, the sunscreen that's really kind of tacky or whatever that you can do to get a grip on the ball. Make that legal for everybody, or start enforcing it for everybody. And I think that's a pretty good point.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting debate yesterday, nonetheless. So, all right, my friend, listen, I appreciate a couple moments as always. Have a good week. Enjoy the games. We will talk next Thursday. I always appreciate a couple moments.
Thanks so much, Rich. Good to talk to you again.
You got it, pal. Be well. Steve Gardner joined us on the Boardwalk on the hotline.